Welcome, and thank you for joining today's MyStar Learning Series virtual discussion on adapting MyStar units to integrate place-based learning. Please introduce yourself in the chat with your name, school or district you're with, and in the spirit of today's discussion, your favorite outdoor place. Maybe it's something like the erupting volcano in Iceland or somewhere closer to home, like your back deck or garden. And while you're doing that, I'll introduce today's presenters. Today, we'll hear from 3 teachers who have used MyStar units to incorporate place-based learning into their classrooms. Kari Keith is a middle school science teacher at White Pine Middle School in Saginaw, and she has done work with Unit 6.1 on the water cycle and 6.6 on invasive species. And then we'll hear about Unit 7.5 from Chuck Palosaari, a middle school science teacher at Jeffers High School in Painesdale, and Lori Wisniewski, a middle school science teacher at Baraga Junior High in Baraga. My name is Lindsay Watch, and I'm a curriculum developer for MyStar, and I'll be facilitating today. So first, let's start off with a poll to see what types of activities we think can be considered for place-based learning. So the options we have today are invite a community member into the classroom, field trips or service learning programs, creating virtual tours or geo-referenced community projects, participating in a study of a local stream to understand the quality of the water, and community action projects. So you may choose more than one answer in the poll, and I'll go ahead and launch it now. Thank you everyone for your responses to the poll. Looks like many, but not all of you thought inviting a community member to the classroom or field trips or virtual tours are considered place-based learning. And it looks like there was definitely consensus on community action projects. But actually, all of these different activities can be considered place-based learning. Place-based education exists along a continuum that moves from primarily teacher-centered activities, like inviting a community member into the classroom to share their experience on a local issue, so more on the left side of this continuum here, to primarily learner-centered activities, moving towards the right side of the continuum, like a community action project driven by the students. These activities can vary in the amount of time and resources needed to implement, but you can also blend and integrate facets from the different levels as it relates to your science content and you and your school's resources. So there's a lot of opportunities here to get your students engaged in their community. Today, we'll hear from 3 teachers who have used MyStar units as the foundation for engaging their students in place-based learning. You will see different aspects of this continuum in their presentations, and we encourage you to think about how this could work in your classroom. During the breakout room session, we'll have a chance to debrief the information they shared and brainstorm how you might apply place-based learning in your classroom. And now we'll hear from Kari about her work with 2 6th grade MyStar units. We'll start with Kari talking about her place-based project with Unit 6.6 on invasive species. Her students did a massive garlic mustard cleanup, and how that experience got her students more engaged in the unit's content and drove her to seek out more opportunities.
And so in the meantime, since then, I knew that I wanted to build at least one more place-based connection. And I sought out a couple different PD opportunities, which I have some information on a little bit later. But these were 2 of the books that I read. And that reinventing project-based learning was really valuable over the past year because we couldn't do the place-based projects the way that we had intended to because of COVID restrictions. So that one really kind of became, your field guide to real world projects in the digital age. We did have to do some things digitally and we adapted. But that quote down at the bottom, I honestly don't know if it's a direct quote. It's something that sticks in my mind, particularly when it comes to MyStar. Albert Einstein said something to the effect of not memorizing facts. Why would he memorize things that can be found in books? And that's kind of how I feel about our students. They can find things on Google quickly, easily. And so if the learning is not valuable to them, if it doesn't have meaning, there's no point in memorizing information. I remember when we were kind of adapting to my star, and that whole idea of not teaching the vocab up front, the connection that I made was teaching students vocabulary up front is like giving somebody an anchor if they don't have a boat. They're just standing there with an anchor. So kids could be standing there with a word that they don't have anything to connect it to. And the same thing became true for our learning. If it's just a bunch of stuff that they're going to memorize, it doesn't have meaning. Our place-based experiences allowed them to see those real world connections right in their own community. So it made all of the concepts so real to them. And that application, they can, like I said, they can Google anything, but can they apply it and see it and understand it and grasp it in a real world setting? So that's for me why we kind of embraced this and went with it. So that first project that I talked about, that invasive species project, we turned into a grade-wide garlic mustard abatement competition. And so we had these signs placed in the park. It was a fairly large park. I'm not going to try telling you how many acres it is because I'll probably get it wrong. So I'm not going to try to guess that. But what we did was we asked the Saginaw County Parks and Rec people to please identify 3 separate areas because we have 3 learning communities. And we each went there 3 different days. And we used these signs to kind of mark them off. Okay, learning community number 1, this is your area. Learning community number 2, this is your area. And we had these areas where the students went in and they removed as much garlic mustard as they could in their assigned area. We had these great cards so that students had to be partnered up, and they took these cards into the field so that they weren't just yanking out any old plant. They had the identification cards, and they had to agree, both students had to agree that that's what they were looking at. They were looking at garlic mustard, not something else. And then they removed it. And in total, we removed almost 800 pounds of garlic mustard that year. And students really, really, they liked it because of what we did in the classroom, because of the unit challenge scenario. They knew that they were making an impact on the ecosystem. About a week or 2 later, we took a different field trip, and the students were pointing out to me, there's garlic mustard over there. Can we go get it? Which was really awesome. But I said, no, you can't go rip garlic mustard out of somebody's landscape. Like that's going to be frowned upon. But I was really excited that they recognized it in another setting. Just a great experience overall. They talked about it a lot. Some valuable lessons from that. We knew that there was some poison ivy in that area, and so we really stressed to the students. We told them they had to have tall socks, they had to have long sleeves, they had to be wearing gloves, and they were great about it. Nobody hesitated to get right in there, and they all dressed appropriately. The one thing that we didn't think about or realize was that stinging nettles will go right through girls' leggings. So we had some stinging nettles. That was an adventure, but that wore off quickly. And let me come back to that. So that was a valuable lesson. And we had some grants, and I'm going to talk in towards the end of my presentation about some funding options and some community partner ideas. But it was such a great experience that we walked away from it saying, we want to be able to do this for at least one other unit for my star. And Water on the Move seemed like a good fit. We've got Shiawassee National Wildlife Refuge right down the road from us, and Terry Robbie, who's here today, she had a connection with the refuge, and she kind of said, hey, here's this teacher who wants to do this unit, and here's the refuge who wants to get students out into onto the refuge. And so she brought us together, and again, it took a little while to make it happen. So when you decide to do this, be patient and let it grow, let it evolve on its own. It will. The other piece of advice I would give is start slow, because when we start talking, when the science teachers start talking, all of a sudden you have this like huge project, and it's just growing so fast, and we always have to take a step back and say, okay, let's go slow and let's do one thing at a time. So Terry brought us together, and we again brainstormed for a couple of months before we really started getting anywhere. And then COVID. So it was last spring when we really started talking about how are we going to make this happen. And then boom, we were closed for COVID, and kind of in a holding pattern and sit tight and wait and see. And then we come back in the fall and we're told no field trips. So we still really wanted to work with the refuge. We really wanted to do some of those things. And it's such a great connection. The 6.1 Water on the Move unit is such a great connection with this area right down the road from us, because it's a wetland and it's a wildlife refuge. And we've had some significant flooding in the past and in recent years as well. So what we decided to do was a Google Earth project. We can't go to the refuge, so let's bring the refuge to the kids. And I know my internet, if I try to load Google Earth and show you, it's going to freeze. It'll get really laggy. So what I did was a screencastify short video so that I can show you a little bit of what we did. So I'm going to play that now, and give me a thumbs up if you can hear it, just so I know that you can. Okay, so as I stated, if I attempt to use Google Earth while I'm in a meeting or anything like that, it really creates a lot of glitches and causes a lot of lag. So I hope that this is going to be a more effective way to share this project with you. I'm not going to show you everything, but I just want to give you an idea for how we incorporated and why we incorporated Google Earth into this project. I don't know how familiar you are with Google Earth. For me, my experience prior to this was, kind of using Google Earth to zoom in on your house, or can I find my friend's house, or can we find a school that says students were using it at school? How many pools do we have in the neighborhood? Like that. So I was not familiar at the time that we could create this type of project in Google Earth. And it was not difficult at all. Once I got the hang of it, it was pretty easy. So you're going to click present, and then it becomes very similar to a slideshow. We can click through the steps right down to the bottom, and as we do, each new slide will provide you with additional information up here in the top right corner. So if I were to click on this, I can add more pictures. And one thing that I did, there's only one picture here, but I have some additional pictures later on. One thing that I did was I invited students to, can't take a field trip, obviously, because of coronavirus, but I invited students and families to visit Refuge and to take pictures, and then to share them with me and explain to them that I would then put their pictures into the Google Earth project. So if we return to the actual Google Earth project, we have the outline of the refuge so that students can get an idea for how big it is. If we visit the refuge, we are actually only visiting this small portion right here, which we're very lucky that it is about probably 2 to 3 miles from our school. And then as I click on the next slide, it zooms in a little bit. And then you'll see that each of these pin drops is a different point in the virtual field trip, so to speak. So I'm going to go ahead and take us to the next one. And actually, I'm going to skip that one because it's a separate location. So this is just an introduction. Each of these pins has a different video, and I'm going to play just a portion of this for you to give you an idea. Hey everyone, I am out here at Palosaari National Wildlife Refuge, and I'm here with Lionel Grant.
But you know what? Wildlife also call this place home. So we are a 10,000-acre national wildlife refuge. Let's look at what that means. I just want you to picture just for a moment. Picture the size of a football field. A football field is equal to 1 acre. Now, what this is, the National Wildlife Refuge is 10,000 acres wide.
So as Lionel stated, 10,000 acres, that's kind of hard for me to grasp, let alone for students. And like I said previously, we're really, really fortunate to have that connection so close to us, and such a valuable part of our ecosystem and the water cycle right here in Saginaw. So Lionel goes on to talk about when and where and how students can visit the refuge. And then as we continue to click through these points, you'll see that we're going to follow this trail and we're going to end up traveling all the way to the river. And so we're here in this video. Like I said, I'm not going to play each of the videos, but this one is a pond located at the refuge, and we talk about runoff and we talk about higher and lower elevation, and we hit all of those important points that are in 6.1. And I'll zoom out a little bit so you can see each of the points along the way as we travel. And each of these will have a brief video, and we'll talk about some of those important points from 6.1, and we will end up eventually here at the river. And then I want to fast forward to this location. So this is a former country club, and it's been acquired by the refuge. And so you can see that difference in the landscaping. And so I want students, as the refuge allows this former country club to go back to its natural state, what I want is for my students to kind of observe those changes that are taking place and that have already begun to take place, and see how then does that affect the movement of water. And then the next thing that we can zoom in and look at, this is not part of the refuge. However, adjacent to the refuge is this former GM plant. And it was quite a large plant in Saginaw. The buildings have all been torn down, but we're left with this huge piece of concrete property. There are currently plans to adapt that or develop that into a riverside park. And so my students latched on immediately because it directly connects to our unit challenge scenario. So if I bring that up, I found some images online that showed the plant in its former state, and then they can observe it now through Google Earth, what it looks like now, and see that all that is left is the concrete lot. And that is right next to the river, and again, right next to the refuge. So I hope that that provides you with a little bit of insight for how you can use Google Earth. And as I stated, this originally came about because...
Okay, I'm going to pause there and bring us back to the PowerPoint, or at least try to. So that was really just so that I could share with you that Google Earth piece that I can't do. Zoom and Google Earth apparently don't work well together. They both take a little too much. Let's see if I can go to the next slide. Can I? Give me one moment. I'm sorry. I'm not able to go to the next slide. I'm like stuck on that slide.
Maybe if you hit escape.
Yep, it's not in full screen. There we go. So that's how we adapted for COVID, to continue with that place-based project. Our idea now, I think that I'll continue to use that Google Earth project so that they can see the whole refuge And then we still want to go to the refuge, and we still want to do some of the projects there and get involved in that, the development of that new park, because it connects to 6.1 and that flooding, the old concrete parking lot and the flooding. Another thing that I did this year with regards to 6.6, I actually changed the unit challenge scenario slightly, as opposed to a letter from legislators in Lansing. I asked for a video message from Saginaw County Parks and Rec. And so both of these place-based units are still growing and changing. And so that video message from Saginaw County Parks and Rec said, hey, you know, we've got these birders that like to come to Immerman Park, and they've been reporting to us that some of their favorite bird species aren't showing up the way that they used to. And we're noticing that some species are increasing while others are decreasing. And we're just kind of short staffed right now, and we're wondering if you can help us with that. And I got high school students to record it. So if it's, you know, not high quality video recording, but it's free. So some possible place-based connections, any local nature centers, your parks. Typically they want people to visit their parks. And what we found was that students talked about, oh, we want to go here with our families once school's out. So they want that. Contact local conservation groups. Even your own school gardens. Students could develop a rain garden or any type of garden on your school grounds. I was thinking about, you know, with regards to that, we're really lucky that that old GM site is being redeveloped, and that's such a meaningful connection to 6.1. But could you contact any city councils and look at any developments that are taking place in your community? And could students kind of encourage the requirement of a rain garden as part of the landscaping plans or something like that? State parks had an initiative recently where they asked for volunteers to remove garlic mustard. So depending on the area that you're in, that might be an option for 6.6. And then other resources to tap into. Michigan SISMA is Cooperative Invasive Species something association, I don't remember, but they're a good contact to have if you're doing a invasive species project. These two right here were both, oh, my fan is winding down. Can you hear it, Lindsay? We talked about it at the beginning, how loud it was. These two were the two professional developments that I did this year that were specific to creating place-based learning opportunities, and they were phenomenal. The Dow Innovative Teacher Fellowship is really phenomenal. What I like best about this one is the professional development is there, the support is there, the resources are there, there's grants available through this PD, but they don't make anything feel like extra work. You know how sometimes you want to apply for a grant, but it feels like a second part-time job and you just don't want to take that on? This isn't like that. Here's a Google form, fill it out, and they're really phenomenal. Wheels to Woods has some grants, but they're a little more involved and very specific for what it can be used for. And I think Lindsay was going to talk about my STEM coordinators and things like that. And the other thing, I know I'm like out of my time, but the other thing I wanted to mention was logistics really quickly, because one thing that we talked about as we were preparing this was, how do you take 125 students to a park and remove garlic mustard? It's really hard. I am very fortunate that I work on a team and everybody's super supportive. So, but not everybody's a science teacher. And so they weren't super comfortable with going out and removing garlic mustard. What we did was we broke into groups. And so each teacher on my 4-person team had a group of about 25 students. One group was taking a hike. One group was removing the garlic mustard. One group was honestly just playing. And then the other group was maybe doing trash pickup or something. I don't remember. And we very purposely did like 20-minute windows. So there was no time for them to get distracted or be off task. It was, you take a 20-minute walk and you're back here because you're switching pretty quickly. And obviously then the science teachers didn't have to do anything science, the non-science teachers didn't have to do anything science related and out of their comfort zone. They got to take a hike, or they got to just play basketball and play on the swings with the kids and have some fun. So I think that was it for me, and I think we have time at the end for question and answers. And let me find my stop share button somewhere. Okay.
Thanks so much, Kari. That was great to hear about how you worked with Unit 6.1 and 6.6 to bring your kids into the local community.
And here in 20 minutes, I was like, ooh, I might be short. Nope, I went over.
That's how it always happens, right? Great information, though. We're grateful for you sharing that. Thank you. And so now we'll hear from Chuck and Lori about Unit 7.5 and the work that they did with their students. Chuck, you might be muted.
Yeah, I screen shared, so all my my windows rearranged. So sorry about that. My name is Palosaari. I teach at Jeffers High School in Painesdale, Michigan, in the Upper Peninsula, about 20 minutes from Michigan Tech. Lori, you want to introduce yourself? I know your voice is a little hoarse today.
Lori Wisniewski. I teach at Baraga Schools in Baraga, Michigan. It's about 30 minutes from Michigan Tech.
Lori and I both had the opportunity to pilot the 7.5 unit this fall. There was an attempt to pilot it the previous spring, but then COVID hit. So we only got about halfway through the unit, and then we had to go remote. But we piloted this unit this fall, and then as part of this unit, embedded within it, is a lesson that prepares students to develop, propose a project that can have a positive impact on their local water quality, the local water resources and the quality of those resources. So in this unit, it really centers around the students using their local water quality report and learning how to read that water quality report and understand what the values and the information that's provided in every community regarding water systems, how they can make decisions as consumers about the water quality, and also understand how natural and human impacts can affect water quality. Lori, would you like to add anything, or should we move forward?
I'm good.
Okay. So the performance expectations that are covered in the unit are going to cover mostly earth science PEs, where the students are going to be looking at the uneven distribution of resources. Namely, it's going to be groundwater or fresh water for drinking water, the impacts of human activity on those resources, and how human population per capita consumption can have an impact on those resources. In the original pilot, there was more of an emphasis on atomic scale particles and atoms and molecules, but I think some of that is going to be possibly reevaluated in the future. And the cross-cutting concept of this unit is structure and function.
So to work up to our place-based project, the kids started learning about how to find out where their drinking water comes from. Sorry, and how engineering is used to get that water to different places because fresh water isn't available equally throughout the country or the world. And then they learned about how to remove contaminants from drinking water. And in 6-1, the students actually take a water walk. And so I taught 6-1 and my kids went around the school and found a waterway that actually leads into the Keweenaw Bay right down from the school. And in this unit, they found out that their drinking water comes from the bay. And so they remembered that what they learned from 6-1, that, hey, we remember seeing a lot of trash in this waterway right next to the school, and it goes into where we drink. So they made that connection from 6-1 and then started to be a little bit concerned about it when they found out where their drinking water came from. And then another part of the lesson, we watched a video about a girl that had to hike like, I don't know, a half an hour up or down a mountain and then up a mountain to get her water. And the water was really not nice drinking water. And I don't think my kids really appreciated that video. Like, they kind of just laughed. And so in the picture, you can see one of the kids is hauling a jug of water. And so I found 3 of these jugs of water and I filled them up, and we went up to the track and they walked around the track to see if they could finish, a whole lap carrying that water. And after that, they realized how lucky they were to be able to turn on the faucet and get clean drinking water. And so then they looked at how human activities affected the availability of drinking water, how population affected that, and then how many people use a water source affects its quality and its availability. And then they looked at their local water quality report to see potential contaminants or things that they should be worried about in their drinking water.
Got the Sorry about that. Within the unit, the students do a lot of model development and using those models to explain their water system or how engineering systems can transport water to homes, or how there are different water systems depending on what water resources are available. So it is very centered locally on whatever type of water system and water resource that you have in your area. And there's also a lot of resources from throughout the state where students are looking at articles about contaminants in different areas of the state of Michigan that might not be a contaminant of concern or issue within their area. And many of the activities have a lot of hands-on types of experiences. They build a sand charcoal filter as one activity. They carry out a simulation where they are looking at how, for the most part, random types of events can impact the amount of water available to a population, depending on weather conditions or population growth or industrial, agricultural usage. And all of these activities are leading them to the point of lesson 7, where they are going to develop some sort of project that they are going to do or could do to have a positive impact on their local water quality.
So it starts out asking, how can we protect drinking water resources? And you watch an anchor video with Greta Thunberg. It gets the kids thinking that there are water resource problems, and students can actually have an impact on what happens and keeping your water clean. And Chuck and I found that Greta Thunberg might be a little bit political, just because of I don't know, the times. And so Chuck actually found a different alternate video to stress that students, you don't have to be some famous person or some big scientist to actually impact, and protect your water resources.
Yeah, Chad Pogrecki was a speaker at the Lake Superior Youth Symposium in May of 2019, and I brought students to Duluth. And I at the time when I'm going through this lesson, I'm thinking, oh, he's a great resource. As a young person in the late 90s, he was growing up along the banks of the Mississippi River, and he just saw the amount of waste and garbage there. And I think he was in a point in his life he really didn't have a direction yet. So he just started cleaning up the river. And, after a couple of years, he started accumulating a larger boat to take the waste. Or he, made a connection with a company for a grant for, PPE, or, he got some good coverage from, the local media. So his message of stewardship of his local lake, local water resource, the Mississippi River, just spread. And now he's been doing this since the late 90s, and his organization's called Living Lands and Water. And he was in 2013 a CNN hero. And then if you go and look on YouTube, there is a video of him as a kind of a more recent video talking about his, what his work has become, and then a video of him back in the 90s when he's just this young kid, maybe 18, 19, I mean, really close to the age of our students, and he just took it upon himself to do something and take action. And I thought that was a good video, especially because I had that personal experience of hearing him speak, and he's kind of a cool guy even as an adult. So I think he kind of connected with the kids or with some of those kids pretty well.
All right, so there was a part in the unit where they looked at different ways contaminants can get into drinking water, and that's the picture that you see after they did that simulation. They had to pick and choose whether they were going to spend money and keep the water clean, or lose their job, or pollute the water. And then they started looking at different stewardship activities by doing research. And they had to keep in mind when they were doing this research how they could relate that to their own local water quality report. And so some ideas or some things that they researched were how to conserve water, how to protect your resources, reducing plastics and keeping them out of the water, get a community cleanup going, go to some meeting or your school and teach people about water quality, marking storm drains so that people know where storm drains are. And they talk about, why that's important. Getting involved in citizens science. And then if there's anything else that's like local to your area, you can, that those aren't like the limits of what you could research. You can find something that's specific to your local area and research that.
So as Lori said, sometimes that local project idea, or if you want to do place-based learning, we want to give students as much voice and choice as possible, but sometimes we kind of have a project in mind, or a particular place in mind. So that can be a great opportunity for you to introduce a particular project that you had in mind or you would like the students to pursue. But each one of these topics had some research resources for the students so that they could use those and then collect some information and then share that back with the class of possible stewardship activities. And some of these, of course, are going to be things that are going to be out in the field collecting, trash and so forth. But, a reducing plastics proposal that the students could, do is, outside of COVID pandemic time periods and safety concerns, would be just to evaluate the amount of plastic that goes into the trash in the school lunchroom, and then from there take some sort of action with the school board to help reduce that plastic usage.
So after they do the research, they present to the class about what they learned about these different stewardship projects. And then the class actually gets to vote on a project that they want to do because of its impact on their local drinking water source. And like Chuck said, actually a lot of, when I did this, a lot of our kids did want to do plastic waste because that's what they were familiar with, or garbage cleanup. But they originally voted to do like a plastic assessment or a waste assessment in the lunchroom. But because of COVID and us not wanting to actually judge people for using single-use plastics during a pandemic or handle stuff like that, we ended up changing our project. But in other times that would they really related to all of this waste that was going in to the lunchroom. So once they did the research, or once they presented their different project ideas, then the students were able to vote as a class on what project they actually wanted to focus on for this unit.
Whoops, excuse me. So I think, Lori, you hit it right on the head with that previous slide. So if you want to continue with Connect Your Ideas.
Okay, so after they look at their group research projects, they obviously want to pick something, like I said earlier, that impacts their local drinking water source and a contaminant that could potentially be in their drinking water. Our drinking water quality report was not very interesting, so we didn't necessarily focus on a contaminant, but we focused on things that could potentially get into their water, like the trash, along the school that went into their drinking water source. And then they made a model of where contaminants could come from and where their drinking water came from. And we did this project when we were virtual, so we utilized Jamboard to make these models.
And then with our second pilot, we could do this as well with, I had more hand-drawn types of models and whiteboards and so forth. But a lot of models throughout this unit, but as part of their final project, these proposal projects, the culminating experience, they are going to be presenting their different their products from throughout the unit. But I had for this particular area where they're choosing a potential project, they are creating a claim, evidence, and reasoning statement. Now, I can't speak to the quality of each CER here, so please don't judge my students or myself on that. But that was part of their final product that I took from lesson 7 is they write these claims, and now they're going to extend them beyond that and come up with a plan. And some of the plans were a little bit more complicated and had budgets and so forth, and some were much more simpler for community cleanups and so forth. But that was part of that culminating experience where they're presenting their work. Did you have anything to add, Lori? Nope. Okay. So in the final phase of the lesson 7, there's a check your progress activity that looks at Stella Bowles, and Stella Bowles is a young person who realizes there's negative impacts on the water quality in her on her home lake, and the students write a CER based off of Stella Bowles' experiences with water quality, and she wrote this book, and I think that's where that information came from to support that CER activity. So that culminating experience that follows in 8 is where those students are sharing those products with you and the instructor and their classmates. You can see some of the paper posters where the students put their products together, models and CERs, and an evaluation of the contaminants of concern from their water quality reports, as well as their stewardship CER proposal for having a positive impact and a plan. I added that plan portion just because I wanted the students to flesh it out a little bit more. Lori, did you want to add anything to this particular slide? Now, if we kind of break away from lesson 7 and the unit, some of the things that we did, between Lori and I, we're teaching different places, but some of the things that we, thought about and added to our slides here to talk about for our place-based learning are going to be associated with tools or resources that might be available to you. So in planning, as Kari said, it's juggling a lot. It's spinning a lot of plates. You want to reach out and find what resources you have. And some of the resources that I use from previous programs and funding for place-based learning come from the Earth Force curriculum. They have within the Earth Force curriculum a community action and problem-solving process. And I use some of those elements in walking the students through their kind of planning of what they could do with these different research areas that you can see on the board there. The students in my class then, when they presented their final culminating products, and they shared their CERs and they shared their plans, we did use like a ranked voting to determine what student interest there was. I had 2 sections, so between the 2 sections, the ranked voting brought it to a community cleanup. But I could see any one of these other projects based off of location or student interest, or even if you have a desire for a particular project to occur, you shaping the students towards a particular, say, plastic evaluation in the lunchroom, or should the school shift to a different, opposed to styrofoam disposable lunch trays, you could do a life cycle analysis, bring in something from 7.4 and determine whether a metal or a plastic reusable tray would be better. But so I think there's a lot of opportunity here, and you shouldn't feel constrained just to how the lesson is written. Maybe the first time going through is you're just kind of getting into place-based learning, use it as written, but I think there's a lot of flexibility and opportunity there. Lori, do you want to add anything?
I was just going to say, and my kids wanted to do a plastic assessment in the lunchroom, but because of COVID, we decided not to. And so we decided to do the community cleanup. But then Chris suggested in another meeting that we had that you could do an assessment of all the trash that you find on your water cleanup, and you're not necessarily like impacting your lunchroom, but you are kind of getting a picture of what kind of trash is actually going into the waterway. So I had to kind of, you can adapt, and you don't have to have something stop you like COVID. Maybe, hopefully that'll never happen again. But
now, as for my particular project, I haven't had the opportunity yet to carry it out. We live in Upper Michigan, so May is finally starting to get nice enough for us to go outside and do the community cleanup project. We're fortunate enough at Jeffers High School to have access to a Michigan DNR lake called Lake Peralt. It's about 3 miles away. It's sharing part of its property with, or the property line with a Michigan Nature Association reserve, the Robert Brown Fen. And you can see on this slide some of the things that in planning your stewardship project, depending on what kind of project it's going to be, this is a cleanup. I had the students develop a stewardship message that they would have. They had the wood shop, they commissioned the wood shop to make a sign that they're going to post at the lake. They determined, you can see from that Google map, students built that kind of segment of different areas that they can break the area up to for cleaning so that they can be efficient. Students were looking up, rules and safety concerns, and they also developed a data collection plan, which I don't really like. They want to count individual pieces opposed to weighing, but that's what they want to do, so we're going to go with it. But don't forget that you don't have to build everything up from the ground up. For example, I just told the students, go look at the Michigan Department of Transportation adopt highway safety rules. Develop your safety rules from that. And also there's things to consider with transportation, lunches, permission slips and letters and so forth that you'll need to coordinate with your school depending on where your stewardship activity is going to happen. It could happen in the back of the school, or in my case, it's at our outdoor classroom where we don't require a permission slip, but we still want to inform parents of what's happening so they're prepared for their students to come home and say, this is what we did today. Lori, do you want to add anything here? Some of the other things that you may want to, Lori, you're going to start this one. Go ahead.
do you want to take this, Chuck?
Sure, I'll take it. So some of the things from previous experiences with place-based learning that Lori and I wanted to bring up are, don't be discouraged with small projects to start. These big projects that you see, you read about or hear about, they might have taken years to get to that point. So just getting something started is moving in the right direction. Location. If you can do something close by or something you can walk to or something that is on school property, the more you can get kids out there, the more you can get them connected with the land or the place, that they're learning about, the better. And also, think about your local resources that you want to consider for outdoor learning or even place-based learning. That could be, we usually think about these kind of units as being associated with earth science, but I think there's probably opportunity, as we'll talk about in the breakout rooms, for other units that are less earth science based to become place-based or modified for place-based learning. Think about your partners who you'll work with and people within your school, cross-curricular, get those other teachers on board to help you out with your projects. And when you're thinking about that project, the more, just like a MyStar model, the more student voice, the more the students feel like they're steering the bus, the better, the more buy-in you're going to get. So I believe those are our slides. So I'm going to go ahead and exit, and I think we'll have an opportunity for questions later. But thank you.
Thank you so much, Chuck and Lori, for sharing all of that awesome information about that unit. I did want to highlight just one opportunity that's coming up about place-based education next year. So there will be a pilot of the Great Lakes Stewardship Initiative with MyStar in MySTEM regions 2, 6, 8, and 16. And so GLSI, or Great Lakes Stewardship Initiative, is place-based stewardship education, which uses place-based learning to teach about the environment and develop capacity for environmental stewardship. They really emphasize that stewardship piece. So if you're interested in that, there will be a financial stipend and ongoing PLCs and implementation support during the pilot. The application process will be announced this summer through your PLF, or you can sign up for updates using the interest form that will throw the link in the chat, and it'll also be shared with the follow-up resources when I send out the email next week. So you can keep an eye out for information on that pilot. Thank you so much for attending today. And if you've come to any of them this year, we are so appreciative of your hard work and dedication, and we're glad that we're able to support you with these sessions. So we have space on our feedback form for you to submit any topics you'd like to see featured in the fall. So please submit your ideas, as we'll be planning for those this summer. And we also have a sketches form that we can throw the link in the chat. And it's also in the slides there, since you have that as well. So thank you so much. If you have to go, please, we appreciate your time, but please feel free to stay if there's any other questions.